have our CEO and founder, May Habib, who's going to host a fireside chat with Colin, the CMO at Vanguard. So I'll ask May and Colin to come up the stage. Thanks, folks.
Everybody, Colin needs no introduction. Longtime CMO of Vanguard, which, if you guys were public, would be what, a Fortune 10?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Very, very
Member owned.
Yeah.
And an incredible partner to Ryder in really the last 3 years of working together. Ryder is like the Eras Tour of AI, and you've been on lots of albums.
Thanks, Taylor.
Right, yeah.
Taylor Swift, everybody.
Yeah. And what's remarkable about customers like Vanguard, Intuit, NVIDIA are in this category as well, who have been with Ryder, is you guys have been up for, changing the game internally as the models and the platform change. And that can be incredibly difficult for folks to pull off. And I think your leadership and the way that you have run innovation within marketing at Vanguard, top to bottom, as Mina said on stage, I think has really been key to your teams being up for the challenge of bringing in state-of-the-art technology with every turn here of the market. So I am very excited to have you here with us and have everybody get to hear from you. There will be a fire alarm, okay, at the top of the hour, and I think it's actually the perfect analogy for what we don't want to do, right? We don't want to be pulling this fire alarm in our organizations, but we absolutely do need to figure out how to reset the level of urgency here. And I think you really nailed that in your leadership. Diego hearkened to, I love the phrase, the CMO moving from bottleneck to architect. So I want to start there, Colin. You have talked about the CMO in these trusted brands like a Vanguard, moving from a brand guardian to an organizational architect. So I'd love to start with folks hearing from you on, how you came to that realization and then how it impacted the way that you led AI coming into the organization.
Thank you, May, and thank you for inviting me. There's probably two things that led me to that thought. So first, when I first got to my job as CMO of Vanguard 8 years ago, one of the things that I did was we went through a big technology transformation. We had, it wasn't a tech stack, it was this tech pile of, and you can fill in your own word, because there's all this stuff all over the place. And I'm going back to 2018.
And you had come from running Australia, the full business.
I had come from running, I was the CEO of Vanguard Australia, and I was the first global CMO of Vanguard. And so, I didn't walk into his office and say, "What are you doing?" It's like I walked into an empty office and it was like, "All right, what is this job?" And one of the things I heard was our technology was a mess. And we convinced the organization to give us money and start to pull it out and redo it. But one of the things that I realized was it wasn't just, and I don't think the organization realized this as well, it wasn't just the marketing organization that was using some of this technology, it had tentacles all over the place. And it was like,
MarTech is just org tech.
Yeah. It was, had everyone known that, I might not have gotten the money to do it. Or it was like, "Oh, Colin, you just go do that. That's fine." It was like, actually, I was touching so many different things. So it's like, oh, all right. So this is really, getting somewhat spinal, and even more so today. But then the other thing I realized, from the brand guardian, the other word for guardian is bottleneck. And, people would want to say certain things. It's like everything for a while they're funneled up, sometimes literally to me. And it was like, we want to say this. Can you look at this? And, I'd spend a fair amount of time in my office just reading stuff. And it's like, yeah, that sounds like Vanguard. I guess that sounds good. And, that's a heck of a way to spend your day, just reading all this copy. And it's like, what am I doing in this role? And somehow combining those two things, which, eventually gets to, and this is, before I think Ryder, it's like, wow, how do you use a system, or is there a system in order to get rid of that bottleneck? And that's that architecture. If you're architecting it correctly, you're actually putting these systems in place that in fact can get those messages right. And you and I'm sure there's people in this room that have spent some time, and sometimes it's important, you're gonna do a TV commercial that's gonna get a lot of airplay. Yep, you probably as the CMO wanna read that copy before like your CEO sees it on TV and is like, then, and you get that call in the driveway, but it's the CEO saying, what was that message that I just saw on TV? So there are some things you wanna read, you don't wanna read everything.
Well, it's interesting that you've thought about marketing in a systematic way since before Writer, and that characterizes a lot of our best relationships, are people who have been wishing, dreaming, hoping to lead their organizations in ways that give everybody a lot more leverage, and then they meet the leverage of all leverage, AI. But you had at that time a 700-800 person organization, and the business process re-engineering to do jobs differently with AI, it's just such a radical mindset shift. I think about our top users at Writer, and we do track it, who uses AI the most at Writer. And you may find it to be surprising, you may not, but for each of the different eras, regardless of what the form factor and what is possible with AI, whether it's the kinds of crazy applications you've seen now, or even in kind of the basic, press release and blog post writing days 2 years ago, the power users at our company are basically the same people for each era. Like, it is a mindset, and that mindset can be taught, but it absolutely has to be recognized and appreciated top down. Ideally, the top leader also has this mindset. But talk to us a little bit about how you approach the business process re-engineering and the kind of space you made for people to not just do this off the side of their desks, but actually have it as full-time jobs.
Yeah, there's a couple things. Diego mentioned in his talk, some of the stuff early on with Writer was a bit of a writing assistant. I think that's the word you use. And we certainly started there.
Yep.
It's like, and our goal at that point in time was, and you're right, I had 700 people working for me, and there was some people in the organization whose job title was writer. And it's like, give it to those people. And that's kind of what we did. And we'd measure success by how many people had this on their desktop. And wow, 75 people had it on desktop, sounds great. But then I'd go throughout my day and I would never hear anything. Like, are people doing things? Are they not doing things with this? But as Writer tremendously progressed from that to what you see now, where it really spans not just the marketing organization, but can span so many different organizations, it became a completely different ballgame. It's like, well, wait a minute, the agents, and X number of years ago, we weren't even using that language, right?
Yeah.
What we were using prompt engineering. Like, everyone had to be an expert on prompt. You don't even hear that anymore. Like, you don't have to be a prompt engineer with Writer anymore. Like, you just speak to it and things happen. But as we saw these things change, we said, wait a minute, you can radically change the process. And I know you've heard me use this phrase, don't pave the cow path. And
I love it.
I stole it from,
Explain
I don't know where
everybody.
I stole it from. But in the 90s, you would do all this, I guess it was like Six Sigma process engineering, all this sort of stuff. And one of the expressions I heard was, you can't just pave the cow path. So a lot of roads, in America, certainly probably here in England, were cow paths that just kind of meandered the way through the countryside, and then someone created macadam, and we just paved over those cow paths. But if you had to do it today, you'd build the road a little differently. You'd actually get from A to B a little bit more direct than kind of meandering through all these things. And a lot of our processes were the same way.
Yes.
And we actually went back to, and we didn't say it at the time, but we went back to some of those 90 processes, and we literally mapped out some processes, and we'd see 37 steps, and within those 37 steps, there were 16 handoffs, and all to, I think that one was to produce an email. Mm-hmm. And it was ridiculous. And instead of having writers say, well, where are the writers, and are they using Writer? It's like, no, we're using Writer to change the entire process. And where do you insert an entire agent in to do all these things? And that gets speed and quality, and yes, efficiency, but lots of different things. And really spending that time to do it was incredibly valuable.
Yeah. We've got a bunch of marketing that we're doing this week on our skills features, and you saw some of them called out in some of the demos. We had a feature around web scraping. Someone had built an SEO audit skill, etc. And the keeper of the skills within our own organizations, we have mapped to, who really become kind of like the ontologists of the knowledge and the repeatable, composable skills that you want the agents drawing from. Tell us a little bit about who played that role inside of your organization, how you saw, talent development as it pertained to AI and this new mindset, what advice you'd give people who are managing, an AI rollout among hundreds of people who may not have the top job today. Right.
And probably also, are doing other things as well.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that, for everybody in this room, I'm sure, like the job is real. There's a ton of work to do. Probably no one's walking into your office saying, all that stuff we were marketing before, forget all that. You're never marketing less. We're always marketing more. There's always more. So you're up against that. But what we found is we just found some zealots, some true believers, some people who really wanted to change the way we did things. And I kind of deputized that group and said, go off and do that. Just a small group of people. There's another expression, perfection is the enemy of progress. If you try to perfect it across 700 people, you'll never get anywhere. You have to start with a small group. And you have to know you're playing a bit the long game. The whole idea is not to do all this within 3 months. You're going to totally change your organization. That's a myth. That's not going to happen. Well, we gave it to a small group of people, and we just started there. And then what we saw is as they created these agents, their work got faster. They could do more. People got envious, and they wanted part of that. How do I get some of that? And not just the marketers, but frankly, the businesses that the marketers work for, if you will, in support of. We're seeing a small part of the organization do this, and suddenly the business was asking questions like, why did it take them 2 days to do an email where it took you 3 weeks to do the email? You're just using email as an example, and clearly that's not sometimes in today's world, not even the best example, but it's one that everyone recognizes. That really became part, and just finding that group of people. And everyone has that group of people. People are just naturally curious. They want to do this stuff. They're probably messing around with it at home anyway. And find that group of people and let them go to town and start to change the process. They affect the people they support, and they affect the people around them.
Did you change some of their titles and roles and responsibilities?
We didn't change the titles, but we changed the roles and responsibilities. And we took them, we kind of took a bit of their day work away and made this their day work.
Great. Yep.
And did that create a less efficient organization exactly at that period of time? Sure, because suddenly you have a couple people who were doing something today that they weren't doing yesterday, and sometimes that wasn't exactly producing something that day. They were working through process work, but it's incredibly important. And I did have the benefit of having an organization of hundreds and hundreds of people. And so a group over here of 20 some odd people doing something isn't necessarily going to get
super noticed
until
they're successful.
Until they're successful. That's exactly correct.
So let's talk a little bit about personalization at scale, which I am sure for the 10 years that you were CMO, you heard from like 50 vendors, right? Come pitch to you. So much of our dream and vision is sales and marketing operate as one team, right? One seamless organization. That we don't operate anymore in these waterfall ways. It's not 54 human handoffs and so much human coordination to do something that, gosh, we don't even know if sales will use by the time we've gotten it to them. And at Vanguard, your salespeople are your advisors, right? Folks who are distributing the financial products that democratize so much of wealth creation, which is a vision we love and a mission we love. Tell us a little bit about, what it took to kind of sell in kind of the big set of use cases around personalization for advisors that you delivered to the org. And I've actually never asked you, like, how did you get compliance to okay this?
Yeah.
Walk people through a little bit of what drove it, what the business impact was, and some of the obstacles.
Let me hit the compliance question first.
Yeah.
Someone had talked about compliance just recently. Like, honestly, the way we got compliance involved was scaring them a little bit to start, because the promise of producing that much more work was going to be a problem for the compliance team unless they got in there to begin with. Because we were, they have a really important role. I respect what they needed. They keep us out of trouble, and they don't want to be a bottleneck. And back in the day, we produced stuff and it was easy for them to do it. But we said, look, we're about to produce a ton more work. You better get on board. And they actually start coming to the meetings and helped us create these things.
Yeah,
And
they were in the agent.
They were in the agent. They were in the agent. And they realized that if they were in the agent and the agent was set up, and then there was some governance around agents, and not like 700 people can't create 700 agents and set into 700 other people. You do the math on that exponentially. That's a lot of agents. But it's not 2 people that can do agents. It's bigger than that. But if they were in there to begin, they realized, our job is going to be that much easier. But back to the personalization. So as marketers, we all hear you're marketing to the masses, that you're marketing to the few, and then the many, and then can you ever get marketing to one? Marketing to one on a one-to-one individual retail basis is hard, but we can certainly get there. We've certainly seen it though in B2B businesses, because another aspect of Vanguard is we have a lot of B2B. And we did that, in 2 ways. One of which, we really understood, our audience and what they needed to hear. And so that's one of the really interesting things about, training the agents through Writer, was we train them on our brand guidelines. That's right. So therefore, it sounds like Vanguard all the time.
And one of the first things you built was a voice of customer app, if I remember.
Yes.
Aggregating all the reviews and understanding
Right, exactly.
Yep.
And then you can turn that into content.
Yeah.
You can turn that into lots of different ways to touch a client, because we have advisor clients, both fantastic firms, but they want to hear things a bit differently. So suddenly we're training the agents to for client A, they like it this way, and for client B, they like it that way. Our brand guidelines are still in there. So, while we are training it in our language, we're also training it in the language of the client. Because it's like, what did they open? What did they react to? What did they read? All the data around that. And suddenly, it seems like it's personalized. And then you get to the sales team who are dedicated to these people. It's like, oh my gosh, this is certainly written for my client. Because we'd hear that all the time in marketing before. It's like, oh, I can tell you wrote this for client A. That's not going to work for me. So I need to rewrite this for client B. And that happens all the time. The agents can now do that. It's like, wow, you just produced that, and it sounds like you really know my client. Thank you so much for knowing my client. And the sales team then becomes an incredible, wind in our sails, because they want that. They want that production.
I love that. We could talk for a lot longer. Colin is going to be here and will be in the breakouts as well. I'd love to close with a final question. What do you wish you knew at the beginning of your AI journey that you now know?
I wish I had myself personally gone in there and just dedicated some time and figured it out.
This afternoon, Colin.
So there you go.
There we go.
There you
Perfect timing.
There you go. So, nothing more powerful when
Yes.
you yourself, and again, the job gets really busy and all this sort of stuff, but to have, it at my fingertips and myself mess around. What I tell all of you is get in there yourself and mess around with it. Have it on your desk. Create the things yourself. No one's going to see it, and maybe you're not actually producing any content or anything that is going to go to anybody. You're just doing it for yourself, but you can get in there, and then just your ability to evangelize after that just becomes that much greater. And it's not the IT team's job, it's your job to do that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that, because, that is a very differentiated operating model that Writer believes, right? Everything that we build, it's for the business user. All this complex stuff that you saw, yes, IT may have helped with an integration, but everything else was done by the business user.
That's right.
All that logic is driven by the business user, and you're not hearing that or getting that from a Microsoft or anybody else. So very powerful for people to see, their CEO, their CMO as power users. My one-on-ones now are so incredible. I need to write about this because literally every meeting is an application. And the quality of conversation and decision making right? Like I'm meeting with our partner manager for Snowflake, and I get to see every customer that's a joint customer of Writer and Snowflake, and where we are in the integration, and where the bottlenecks are, where the executive conversations are, what the pipeline looks like, and it's an interactive app that the partner manager built in 10 minutes before the meeting because we're integrated across our CRM. I mean, it is so powerful for the executive to be very hands-on. It drives so much of the right behavior. Ain't nobody bringing a Google Doc, right, to my one-on-one anymore, right? Knowing that I myself am a power user.
And that's
right?
an efficiency savings for sure. And
Yeah.
Diego talked about this. You start with efficiency, but that's not the end game. The quality of that
Yes.
conversation has to be so much better.
Yes, it's so much better. And the writer speed that hopefully you have felt as customers and partners, we want to give that to the customer too, right? So us operating this way creates a really
Absolutely.
great cycle. So thank you so much for joining us in London,
welcome.
Colin. Thank you, everybody. Excited for, the fire alarm in about 30 seconds, okay? Take it as a wink from the universe that we got to up the urgency in our organizations, and excited for the breakout sessions this afternoon. Thank you.